he just went low. He's in his head. He's in his head. He's open. His head wide open. Cracked open in the face.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Mario Mantis 100 back again with another episode of How's My Team. I'm actually recording this early because it's Friday, but we got to talk about the Giants, we got to talk about the women's Titans team and also the men's Titans team as per usual. So without further ado, let's get started with the Giants. So yeah, like I said, it is Friday, Friday morning still, not quite Friday afternoon yet, but it feels weird recording it this early. But the Giants played on Thursday night. They played against Essendon, and it was another win for the Giants. It was a 48-point win over the Essendon Bombers down in Marvel Stadium in Melbourne. So fantastic result, 104-56. Very good defense in the first half, I will say. It kept Essendon to 1-8. In the particular game, compared to 8 goals 3 for the Giants in the first half. Obviously, the Giants finished off with 16 goals and 8, and Essendon was 7 goals and 14 after starting. The first quarter was no goals and 5 behinds, and ended up having 8 behinds before they scored the first goal. They obviously got on a little bit of a roll in the third quarter, scored 4 goals 2. And then ended up scoring 2 goals for Essendon, compared to 2 goals nothing, then 8 goals 3. So it's a big explosion of 6 goals 3 in the second quarter. Then obviously 5 goals 2 in the third, and 3 goals 3 in the fourth quarter. So still a little bit slow from the get-go in the first quarter again, which has been something that the Giants have done pretty much all year, and it has hurt them in many games previously. But it was good. It was good. They could have probably won by a lot more, but I think they were more in third gear by the time the last quarter came out, and they knew that they were going to win. Obviously rested a couple of players like Jake Stringer and Cadman towards the end of the fourth quarter. But goal scorers, Kieran Briggs scored 1, Cullen Brown scored 2 goals 1, Cadman 1 goal 1. Scroll down. Tom Green scored 1 goal nothing. Toby Green's 2 goals and 1 behind. Grzuski. I always forget how to pronounce his name because it's some of these last names are pretty hard. So he scored 2 goals. Darcy Jones scored 1. Xavier Halloran scored 1. Jake Riccardi scored 2, and Jake Stringer top scored with 3 goals 1. Against his old side, obviously for Essendon, Peter Wright scored 2. And realistically, that's about it for them, like the major goal scorers. So it was a pretty handy percentage boost. We're up to 116 now, 116.0. So we're 0.8 behind Hawthorn, and we're behind 0.8 to the Brisbane Lions, who are the next 2 teams in front of us in terms of percentage. Hawthorn being in 7th right now, and Brisbane still being in 2nd. Obviously, it's the first game of the weekend, so we are in 4th at the moment. Obviously, we'll probably drop down with many games left to play, including obviously the Brisbane game today against the Western Bulldogs, which is very important, especially for the Bulldogs, because obviously they are 4 points out of the top 8 at the moment. They're sitting in 9th. And it will be very, very hard for them to get back into the top 8 if they lose this game against Brisbane. Although with Brisbane, they're trying to keep a top 2 spot and obviously keep a spot in the top 4. Because obviously the Giants just still won, but you've still got like teams like Adelaide 2 points behind them. You've got Geelong, who obviously still got to play. They're 6 points adrift. But their run home is relatively well scouted for them to make it into the top 4. Obviously Collingwood are on top. They've got 6 points adrift from Brisbane. So it's a win and a half. And Collingwood have got a decent amount of games against some top 8 sides in the next few weeks as well. Of course, leading into the end of the season, which they could possibly drop some. Ultimately, I think that they might drop one on the way through Collingwood, just due to the fact that they'll probably want to rest some players. Obviously, they did that a little bit last week, and when obviously the Gold Coast Suns beat them by a goal, obviously away from home as well. They've travelled outside of Melbourne for the first time in a long while, because Collingwood don't do that very often. Obviously, that is mostly the joke, but it is a real thing that they don't travel much, and it's kind of bullshit outside of Melbourne. So they could drop another game and still be okay, but Brisbane has still got to just keep on winning. Obviously, Fremantle are in 8th, Hawthorn are in 7th, and Gold Coast are in 6th, but they could still win their games as well. Obviously, it's very important for some of these teams to win. Well, realistically, the top 10, top 11 teams are still fighting for finals contention. Obviously, for Port and for Sydney, obviously, who are in 11th and 10th, it's much harder. They've got to win a lot more games and have, like, the Western Bulldogs, Fremantle, and Hawthorn lose right around that, or even Gold Coast, Geelong, or even the Giants at some stage, even though the Giants have won against Essendon. So, to get into the top 8, they'd have to have one of those sides, if not multiple sides, kind of drop off at the same time, because you don't want one really dominating over the other, or one taking a win off the other and then like fighting against each other. Say like the Gold Coast, for example. Obviously they're still going to play the Giants in the second last round. Obviously the Giants took points off them, won the first game of the Expansion Cup, obviously at NG, coming from behind to win that game. The Swans and Port don't want the Suns then to win at home against the Giants, because obviously that'll be taking 4 points each side away from an opportunity to make it into the finals. So obviously it's like 8 points. They kind of adrift in the fact that obviously if they lose, it also makes it very hard for them. Obviously, I think if they do lose one, they're still mathematically possible to make it, but it'll be much harder for the Swans and especially for Port Adelaide. But great win. Obviously, could have been well over 50 points. They did score 100 points or 100 plus points for the 5th game in a row, which obviously is a club record as well. And Essendon have had the slight advantage at Marvel Stadium. Have won the last couple of fixtures, so it's great to get a win and a good percentage win as well. Though they could have been a little bit better on that. I think they could have piled on a lot more points. Probably would have helped a little bit more in percentage, but can't be too upset with it. Obviously, like I said, obviously the worst percentage in the top 8 right now is Fremantle, but obviously Hawthorn and the Brisbane Lions pretty close behind or close in front of the Giants in terms of percentage right now, because then after that it's the Gold Coast Suns with 121 and then 127 to Geelong, and then obviously if the Bulldogs move back into the top 8, they're at 129.8 at the moment. Obviously that'll build even further. Even with a close win, it might build up a little bit percentage, but they'll be right around that 130 mark, because you're looking at Collingwood and Adelaide as your top numbers in terms of percentage at the moment in the season right now, and they're both on the same amount of percentage, 136.1. So yeah, very good to get some of these percentage points back, especially with some of these wins or some of these games against teams that are well outside of the top 8. Obviously, Essendon are like in 14th, I think. Yeah, 14th at the moment. Obviously, they're still in front of St Kilda, but obviously the Saints, who knows with the Saints, they could ultimately get in front of Essendon at some point. And obviously these injuries are not helping Essendon in any way, shape or form. So, yeah, but obviously we've still got more games. Very important game next week, obviously on Friday, which would be today next week, which obviously is the Sydney Derby, which I'll be going to. So about this time next week, I'll probably be down in Sydney, around about midday. Probably be down there if I travel down early. It depends on when my dad is available, because obviously he's coming to the game with me. We've already bought our tickets. The tickets are all sorted. Don't have to worry about that at all. And yeah, it's going to be a great time. Upper decker seats as well, so I'll be getting some photos obviously of the game, and yeah, we'll see how we go in the Battle of the Bridge, because we haven't had quite the nick over the Sydney Swans in most recent times, especially in big games, but this seems to be one of the biggest ones, obviously not including obviously the final series from last year. Obviously that was a big one just due to the fact that it was a qualifying final, but obviously it's probably the biggest one a lot in the last couple of years apart from that final, just due to the fact that obviously whoever loses is in big trouble of not making finals. If it's the Swans that obviously lose, they're pretty much, you'd say, almost put a stripe across their name of making finals this year, because it's going to be much harder if they do lose. But here's hoping it's going to be a cracker of a game, I would imagine. They usually are. I imagine it's probably going to be close as well, so hopefully it'll be a good game, and it'll probably be a fantastic game to watch in person. So with that, obviously Giants 48-point winners over Essendon in Melbourne. As for this week coming back home to play on Friday night at NG against the Sydney Swans in the Battle of the Bridge and the Sydney Derby. Well, it's officially Monday morning. I probably look like a mess, but we got to talk about the Titans. So let's start with the Titans girls. So they actually won 24-12 against the Tigers at Leichhardt Oval. I will say that their first half was not as good as their second half, and ultimately that has been like that pretty much for the last 2 games as well for the women. Because I think they were down 12 points to 8 at halftime. So the Tigers didn't actually score any points in the second half. They really kind of dropped the ball a lot and made a lot of errors in the second half, whereas the Titans were pretty much doing that a lot, especially early on in the first half. We'll say at the second part of the first half, the Tigers were pretty gallant in defence. We had some opportunities to score multiple times, and the girls, I think they're still working out the kinks of their game plans and stuff like that, but they did play relatively well, especially in the second half. They didn't let up at all, and put the Tigers to the sword. So that with that, obviously, that's the wrong table. That moves us up a position to 10th, because ultimately the Tigers and the Raiders are the only 2 teams that haven't won a game yet, and our for and against is still pretty bad, even though the Warriors lost yesterday as well, the Warriors girls. But obviously it is the Warriors that we do play next week as well. We play over at Go Media Stadium in Auckland. So it's another doubleheader away from home with the Warriors girls, and then the Warriors, like the male Warriors team, battling the men's Titans team, which we'll get to in a second. But ultimately, the girls played relatively well in the second half. Obviously, there's a bunch of combinations that still need to be worked out. But it wasn't a bad result. I think that ultimately those 2 teams playing towards the bottom of the ladder, it kind of felt like a game like that. Like obviously there was a team, both teams were desperate to win this game, and ultimately the Titans did end up getting a leg up at the end, and obviously just put them to the sword. I wouldn't say relatively early because the Tigers did pressure towards the start of the second half and towards the end of the second half. In the middle, the Tigers definitely dropped the ball a lot. There was a lot of penalty, like a lot of errors against them. A lot of penalties went against them as well, and were playing up to snuff in the middle of that second half, and that's when obviously the Titans scored the most points during that period as well. Obviously with penalties and meters gained and possession being held by the Titans women's team. It was only a matter of time before they were going to score points, and they did score points, and they scored points in droves as well. So it's still not a lot. Obviously, 24 points to 12, still a decent amount of points we're going to win back. Obviously, we scored right on the Hooter as well, and got the conversion. So that was fantastic as well. Put it up to plus 12. So we're still relatively behind, obviously, in terms of for and against. I think it's minus 40, minus 42. So we've actually got a worse for and against record than the Tigers do. The Tigers have only got 40. I think relatively it was that first game against the Bulldogs. I think that kind of helped them in that regard. So yeah, but great result for the Titans women. Got the first win of the 2025 NRLW season under wraps now. Hopefully that will give us a little bit of momentum to win a few more games, because obviously we've got the Warriors next week on Saturday afternoon. There will be, I think it's 2:45, I think local time, because it's 12:45 here. So I think that might be 2:45 p.m. New Zealand time, because it is a couple of hours ahead from obviously my state, and then obviously the main, like the male, I was going to say the men play at 3. So yeah. But yeah, after the Warriors, they have the Bulldogs, and then they have the Roosters, who beat the Broncos yesterday, not convincingly, but they did beat them, and then the Sharks after that. So it's going to be interesting the next couple of weeks to see where we shape up, especially because the Warriors obviously are around the position that we are at, and then obviously the Dogs near the top, the Roosters obviously are at top, and the Sharks are in the top 6, which obviously the top 6 will make finals this year, with the women's premiership expanding to 12 sides this year. So we've got quite a few games to pick up. Hopefully we can snag a couple of wins in that, but we'll see what happens, because yeah, we've got some tough games coming up, so we'll see. But at least a 24-12 win over the Tigers for the Titans women's team. Fantastic result. First win on the board for them this season, so hopefully it'll be much more coming as well. So if it was a roller coaster this weekend, we had many of the highs, obviously with the Giants and the Titans women's team being the highs. There's going to be some lows, and unfortunately the Titans men didn't bring 3 for 3 this week, and they lost. They lost heartbreakingly in the last 20 seconds, 21-20 over against the Tigers in the second game of the doubleheader. And I will say that the Titans shot themselves in the foot. Honest to God, because they were behind at halftime. They were down, I think they were down 12-8, 12-8, I believe, at halftime. Let me have a look. No, actually they were up at halftime. Sorry, 14 points to 12 at half. And it was looking relatively good. The possession was very much in the favour of the Titans at the start of the second half. Obviously 2 penalty shots in the space of 4 minutes put the Tigers in front. We scored again. It was 20 points to 16 with about 13 minutes left, and we thought maybe we might be able to held them out until 3.5 minutes left in the game. They scored to tie it all up, obviously with the conversion. And unfortunately with the conversion, they missed it for the Tigers. So obviously it was a tie game. And then, yes, Adam Dewey kicked a field goal in the last 17 seconds to drop Titans with another loss. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There was a lot of players on that team playing yesterday that didn't give anywhere near 100%. I don't even think they gave 50%. They did not pull their finger out at all, and they played like absolute shit. Obviously, there were some players that obviously were playing hard as they can, especially Tino, who had an issue with his knee and looked like he was not going to play the rest of the game, especially towards the end of the first half. But he soldiered on and played the rest of the game. Ultimately, we still had another player on the bench that still wasn't used, which was Khan Pereira, and that's the second time in 2 weeks that has happened that we've had an extra player on the bench, a winger on the bench, and they have not been used at all. I can't fault players like Jalen de Groot, because obviously he scored 2 tries. Can't fault AJ, though he did have obviously a few errors. Jane Campbell obviously had a couple of errors as well, but he played relatively well. Chris Randall played well. Like I said, Tino played well. Kieran got absolutely battered in a tackle, but he played strong as he usually does. There was players on this team that played well, but I think there's a lot of players that didn't play anywhere near their best, and they just didn't give a shit. Honestly, obviously for Sam Verrills, it's 50 games for the Titans, and Mo Forawaka with 157 games, I think. 150 or 167, one of those two. Became the second most capped player for the Titans team in general. I think obviously Mark Milicello is in front of him by a few games at this point. So if Mo plays for the Titans next year and doesn't get injured at all, he should overtake that spot as the number one, like the most capped player in Titans history. But we had it on a silver platter. We were in front for, like, I know it was only like 6 points, but at that point when AJ scored, we thought maybe the game was close to being done. Obviously they needed to score more points. But it was on a silver platter for us to win, because ultimately the Rabbits lost relatively heavily. So they were within, we had to score, we had to win by 7 to get off the bottom of the ladder. And with the Eels losing on Saturday afternoon in the early game, they ended up being on the same for and against as the Rabbits. So they actually dropped a spot. They dropped to 16th as well. So we had a situation where, especially with the Eels, with their 3 byes, they're done for the rest of the year. We had a position to win this game and get off the bottom if we won by enough points. And we just didn't do that. Obviously, we lost by 1, so the for and against difference is 8 at this point, which is not that bad, thankfully. It's probably easier to make up, obviously, with the Rabbits and the Eels. Obviously, the Rabbits have still got another bye to go, so they've got another 2 points, so they'll be on 18 points at least by the end of this season. So that will move them up to 13th whenever they get their next bye. But they've got, I think their next game is against the Sharks. The Eels are against the Broncos. And the Titans, obviously, in the doubleheader after the women's game, have the Warriors away, which is a possible game that we could win. We just have to, because we have won against the Warriors, especially when our form hasn't been our way over in North Queensland. But obviously this Warriors team is a much different team compared to what they were even 12 months ago. because they're in fourth now. They're still keeping their position in fourth. But yeah, we had an opportunity to get off the bottom of the ladder. And yeah, we basically had it on a silver platter. It was a game that seemed to be unlosable, and somehow they played as if they wanted to lose that game. And I don't like. There was footage today that showed after the game Des going up and blowing a gasket, and conjuring up a storm in the sheds after the game, getting the players out of showers. And I don't blame him. I don't blame him for being pissed off, because ultimately they had this game won. They had this game won at multiple points during the game. They had this game won, and yet time and time again. And I got to give credit obviously to the Tigers, because they've been under an immense amount of pressure as well, and they showed up when they needed to. They held possession. Especially when they need to work up to get to a situation of attacking kicks and putting points on the board and scoring tries and that sort of thing, and ultimately kicking penalty goals when they needed to as well. But it's an issue that the Titans had this game pretty much under wraps. Could have got a win for the first time in a couple of weeks, and they just shot themselves in the foot. And I don't understand why this team continues to do that on a regular basis, because it's not good enough. It's not good enough. And I feel like with some of the players that we've had in this side, there's some that are not pulling their finger out at all. And I know that probably Des is probably going to go at this point. He's going to go, and they're going to sack him at the end of the year, which I hate the fact that we're doing that. Look, I understand that some players he might have lost some of the locker room and some of the players, and possibly some of them might be still pissed off with the whole Justin Holbrook situation in terms of coaching. But part of that issue was not Des. Yes, obviously Des was the coach that was coming in, but Des wasn't coming in mid-season. So, obviously Des was going to sign with a position open, and he wanted to come to the Titans. But it's not his fault that Justin Holbrook was released early last season, a couple of seasons ago. Yes, obviously Des is picked up, obviously where Holbrook was let off, obviously in the head coaching position, but it wasn't his fault that Justin Holbrook was released mid-season a couple of years ago. It wasn't like they're saying, oh yeah, release it now and I'll come in straight away, or I'll come in and, come in the next year. It was the board's decision. So any players that have, feelings towards that, it should really be on the board and the chairman of the club and the higher positions in terms of the board members of the Titans, because obviously they were the ones that sacked Holbrook in the first place during mid-season. So I don't understand why it'd be on Des. Ultimately, I understand it hasn't been a winning culture around the Titans for quite a while, since obviously Holbrook took us to finals in 8th position a few years ago now. But taking it out on Des a little bit, I understand the way that he coaches is definitely different compared to a lot of other coaches. You don't really see it a lot from coaches. Maybe Ricky Stewart obviously is one of them, and Craig Bellamy is another one. They kind of follow in the similar boat, where they do give their players sprays. But obviously, and that's the way that Des obviously coaches. But it's one of those issues where this team, I swear, decides that it wants to play when it wants to play, and half the time they don't. They might play 10 minutes and then just go, yeah, no, that's enough. And I swear some of them are just sitting there just doing it for contract pay, honestly. And I don't feel like that's what the fans deserve. The fans deserve a lot better. honestly, the supporters that have been there day in, day out deserve better than that. And some of these players that are playing like this, it's just an excuse. Like, they need to play a lot better. Sorry about the rant, but it's just the way that I'm feeling. Like, I was pissed off because I went to work, like, just as the game finished. I started work yesterday, and I was in a bad mood after watching pretty much the majority of that game. I watched the majority of the game, and they played all right, and ultimately were playing a lot better than the Tigers were in many areas of that game as well. In terms of possession, in terms of attacking kicks and all that type of stuff. And they had this game won. And somehow, like the game against the Dolphins when they were up 26 or 24 points or whatever it was, and they're at halftime, and then the Dolphins run them down and won that game. It somehow was a game that we couldn't lose. Somehow we've lost it. And that just sums up this year in a nutshell for this team. And honestly, I feel like more and more each week, they're going to get the wooden spoon. Obviously, we've got the Warriors next week. Then the week after, we got the Panthers. Then we got the Rabbitohs in another spoon bowl game, basically, at that point. The Sharks, unless the Rabbitohs obviously come with a couple of wins, but I doubt it with the injuries that they've got. Then we've got the Sharks after that. Then we've got the Warriors at home. The Dolphins at Suncorp. And then we finish with the Tigers at home. So it's not the best run home, honestly. And yeah, it feels closer and closer every week that we're getting a wooden spoon. And honestly, with some of the players that are playing, this team kind of deserves it. And I hate saying that because there's some players that obviously on this team that are playing their hardest week in and week out, even in multiple positions. Some of them that are even injured, like I said, Tino had a complaint during the game as well with his leg, and he played phenomenally. Like, he was one of the best, I flubbed that word, but he was one of the best guys on the field, and he is relatively day in and day out for this team all the time. And I don't understand how they keep getting into a position where they lose games like this, because it's, I don't know. I don't know what the answers are either. Because sacking the coach is apparently an answer, but it's not going to be an answer because we don't know what the fuck is happening. And I don't know who they're going to sub in as coach. Because if they want, if they want to wait out, they could have Des for another year. And relatively, if they're going hard for Craig Bellamy, I would hold out with Des for maybe half a year next year. If we don't get off to a great start, obviously sack him. But we need to, if we're going to sign Craig Bellamy, we can't sign him next year. So sacking Des at the end of the season, which is more and more likely, which is probably what the board is going to do with the way that they're kind of trying to reshape the team, who's going to come in for that position? Because we can't have Craig Bellamy because Craig Bellamy signed on to the Storm next year. So he's already signed. So if they want Craig to be there, they can't sign a coach for a year and then sorry, my elbow's getting a little tired. But they can't sign a coach on for a year and then have Craig come in. That just wouldn't make any sense. So I don't know what the fuck this team is going to do in terms of coaching, because yeah, it's a mess. And if they're going for Craig Bellamy and that's their choice that they want, they have a big decision to make in the next couple of weeks, because if they want Craig Bellamy at the club, they're not going to have him next year. They're going to have him in 2027 is at the earliest. So they're going to have to work something out. But yeah, with that rant sorted, or the double rant basically, 21-20 loss against the Tigers at Leichhardt Oval for the Titans men's team. So that'll be it for this episode of How's My Team. Sorry about that huge rant about the men's Titans team, but it's just one of those things that you see me week in, week out. I was getting so excited, especially at the start of the season, with a couple of wins on the board, a couple of losses that weren't actually that bad. I was feeling relatively alright early in the season, especially with early losses. It's not as bad. Obviously, you want to bank as many points during the start of the season. As much as you can, but obviously you don't want to drop off that massively at the end of the season that you don't win anything. But it's just this team. I don't understand this team. You take the 3 buys out of it at 6 points. They've won 4 games this year, 4, and yeah, it's nowhere near good enough. Honest to God, it's nowhere near good enough. But I will put an amendment in. Ultimately, obviously, the round in the AFL is finished. So the Giants were sitting in 4th. They're now sitting in 6th. Obviously, with Geelong, Hawthorn, Adelaide winning, and Fremantle also winning as well, but their percentage didn't go up that much. In fact, their percentage is still worse than the Giants, still the worst in the top 8. But the Gold Coast Suns did lose massively to the Adelaide Crows, so their percentage actually drops to 115.5, so their percentage is actually less than ours now. So ultimately, we're not the second worst in terms of the top 8 in terms of percentage at the moment. So the Giants are sitting in 6th, but we do have a situation where we can jump into the top 4 again. Ultimately, if we win against the Swans this week on Friday, it'll be very important for the Giants to win as many games as possible, because a top 4 spot is up for grabs, and ultimately Collingwood obviously lost to the Dockers yesterday as well, which obviously helped Fremantle kind of cement their spot in the top 8. So it's actually 2 points up the top as well. So Collingwood aren't actually confirmed to be finishing premiers on top of the home and away season, because the Brisbane Lions are not that far behind them. They're only 2 points away, obviously, with the draw helping the Brisbane Lions in that regard. But they're not far away, and I think Collingwood has still got a few top 8 sides to play for the rest of their season. So it'll be very interesting to see who finishes at top. But yeah, just wanted to make an amendment. I usually don't, but considering that game was Thursday and now it's Monday, then obviously the next week, just wanted to make an amendment just to say that the Giants had moved down, obviously from 4th position down to 6th, but are sitting pretty good. Obviously 4 points from 8th, and another 4 points from being out of the 8 completely. With obviously the Western Bulldogs going down. But the Western Bulldogs and the Suns got to be careful, because if the Swans get another couple of wins, like the Swans are only a win behind, a win and obviously percentage, but a win behind Western Bulldogs and 2 wins out of the 8 at this point. So it's going to be very difficult for them. Obviously Port Adelaide lost as well, so they're almost pretty much mathematically crossed out for this year. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens towards the end of the season. So it's shaping up to be a huge Sydney derby this week, Battle of the Bridge at NG. So hopefully the Giants can silence the Swans, but in most recent memory hasn't been the case. But just wanted to make an amendment on that. So they're not sitting in 4th anymore. They are sitting in 6th, but that's fine. But yeah, apart from that, that's really it. Obviously they won. The Titans women's won, so 2 out of 3, not bad for this week, but could have been 3 out of 3 with the men's Titans team. But I'm not going to talk about that anymore, because I've talked about it enough this episode and ranted multiple times. So with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. This has been my Man Times 100. You guys have a great day or night, and of course, take care. And sorry if I sound weird in this part, but do have a sore throat, and I don't have any soothers or anything, so trying to live through it, but it is a day off, so thankfully it's not as bad. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and take care.